Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Burning Questions. And the topic that set the internet on fire this week is what are Russia's real capabilities in attacking Europe or the Greater West? And today with us, we have Alexander Khara, who's going to help us answer this question.
My name is Alexander Khara. I'm director of the Center for Defense Strategies, a Ukrainian think tank that focuses on the foreign and defense policy of Ukraine. Talking about the forthcoming summit of NATO and the shifting in the security environment in Europe, it's good that finally our Western partners wake up to the threat that Russia poses not just to Ukraine and not just to those countries that are not fortunate enough to be members of the European Union and NATO, but the whole West in general. Unfortunately, it didn't happen in 2008 when Russia invaded Georgia. It didn't happen in 2014 when Russia illegally annexed Crimea and started a proxy war on Donbass. And unfortunately, it didn't happen even in 2022 when the Russians relaunched their full-fledged invasion of Ukraine. But finally, even conservative countries, so-called old Europe, they realized that Russia, within 3 to 8 years, will be capable of full-fledged invasion of one of those NATO member countries. And by the way, recently, the former military commander, Mr. Brown, said that Russia will be able to attack an Estonia, let's say, and NATO allies would not be able to repel this attack right away. They would have some time to regroup and to do something, even though then since 2014, there are assurance forces on the territory of the Baltic states, Poland and Romania. It shows the poor state of NATO, and they actually enjoyed the peacetime, and they wasted the peace dividend, not invested too much into their defenses. Perhaps we can talk separately about Finland, that was not naive after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it's possibly one of the most capable countries. And not to mention Poland, that invested into its own defense and is paying more than the rest of the European alliance, and actually more than the United States themselves. So there are security risks to the eastern flank of NATO, and it's possible for Russia to make a provocation. They do not need to invade Estonia like they did it with Ukraine in 2014 or 2022. They want to destroy the alliance in general. And if the Americans and the old European countries would not rush to help the Baltic states, it means that NATO is actually dead. And it's one of the goals of Russia to reestablish its hegemony, at least in Central and Eastern Europe, and possibly over the whole European continent. And we've seen discussions in different forums. But finally, on the eve of the summit, we understand that almost all NATO members are ready to invest in their defenses. In 2025, 23 out of 32 members will reach the 2% of GDP investment in their defenses. And in the forthcoming summit, they are going to discuss and agree on the 5% target, which stands for 3.5% for the defense per se, plus 1.5% for the infrastructure related to defense. And we're talking about the direct confrontation with Russia. And certainly Russia is pretty good at waging so-called hybrid war. Throughout the last decade, we've seen sabotage operations on the territory of the European Union members and NATO members, targeted assassinations in London, in Berlin, not to mention Sofia and some other capitals. There was a huge amount of cyber attacks and different kind of ITC related attacks, not to mention the interference in the political affairs. Recently, Romania canceled the first round of presidential elections, and even though they succeeded to getting rid of the Russian social media influence operation, but Romania was just like about to lose to the Russian propaganda, and to the pro-Russian candidate was about to win this election. And certainly the Russians are pretty active in other countries as well. So the threat is here. So there is a commitment of the NATO, or at least European part of NATO, to invest in their defenses. And talking about the United States, which is a pretty peculiar subject, we see that the current administration does not see Russia as a direct threat to the United States, even though all the ICBMs that the Russians possess are aimed at the United States, and there are more than 1,000 on duty ICBMs ready to be launched to the United States. Not to mention the tactical nukes in much higher numbers that are aimed at the European alliance of the United States. We see that Mr. Trump wants to have good relations with Russia, and possibly he didn't know that he doesn't know that each and every American president wanted to have a to give a fresh start of relations with Russia. But finally, they all ended up with worst possible relations with Russia, because neither values nor interests of Russia are in line with that with those of the United States. But we have this president, and he is not willing to assist Ukraine anymore. We are not expecting any additional security assistance packages voted in the Congress. It's problematic for us to get access to the American defense industry. Unfortunately, during the last G7 summit in Kananaskis, Trump decided to leave the summit before it was over. And there was no meeting between the American and Ukrainian presidents, where Ukrainian president wanted to raise the question of, let's say, procurement of the American, first and foremost, air defense systems for Ukraine. But I hope there will be opportunity for Zelensky to meet Trump during the Hague summit of NATO.
So I was actually talking to someone the other day about how a lot of people in America or in Europe, not politicians, not lawmakers, but people in general, don't necessarily perceive the threat of Russia attacking them, because when they think about war, right? And I think when we all thought about war before the war actually came to our doorstep, we imagine sort of like a World War II scenario where warplanes are flying over your cities. They drop bombs. Every other building is destroyed, and or like a Syrian scenario where you think of like these whole cities that have been destroyed over years, right? And in your head, war is just kind of like this mass destruction immediately, right? And people in America, for instance, know that can't happen because they know that, you know, Russian tanks are not going to roll into the United States, and it's going to be very hard for Russian air warplanes to do what kind of like what this, to do what this image of war or world war is in our head. And same for the Europeans. Do you think that's correct in why it's so hard for them to understand the danger, and what should they think about how an actual modern World War III would play out for them to start understanding the threat sooner?
First of all, it's so comfortable to think that war is something it's like a deviation from the normal human nature, which is not. The humans has been fighting wars from the beginning. I mean, for when they organize themselves as societies and states. So war is the factor that will be with us for a long time to come. Second thing that people are not comfortable about thinking about nuclear war. And actually, it's a paradox. In 1960s, there were a bunch of scientists, political scientists, who were thinking about unthinkable, about the nuclear holocaust. First and foremost, I'm talking about German Hahn, who actually coined the concept of mutually assured destruction. But paradoxically, this readiness to use all arsenal of weapons and to destroy the humanity deterred the empire of evil from the direct confrontation with the United States or with its NATO alliance in Europe. Unfortunately, we've seen recently, I mean, since the Biden administration, or possibly even Obama administration, that Russians were successful in deterring the United States from helping Ukraine, even though it was in the interest of the United States not to allow Russia to annex territories of a sovereign state. And should we mention that in 1994 we signed so-called Budapest Memorandum, according to which our American partners and some others assured us of our sovereignty, territorial integrity. And the Obama administration did nothing to deter Russia. Vice versa, it was deterred by the Russian nuclear blackmail rhetoric. And then we've seen the same situation in the beginning of this full-fledged invasion in 2022, when the nuclear fear paralyzed the thinking and actions of the Biden administration in 2022 and then in 2023, when there was momentum and Ukraine was able to put an end to this war on Ukrainian terms. The Americans were slow in changing their mind and providing Ukraine with the capabilities we need to defend ourselves. And now with the Trump administration, we've seen the same thing. Because Trump is talking about the unwillingness to launch the third world war with Russia over Ukraine. And such a rhetoric just encourages Putin and some other ugly actors on the world scene to challenge the United States and the alliance. I can imagine the situation when, let's say, Estonia is being invaded, not like Ukraine, but let's say just 10 square kilometers of Estonia. And then Russia blackmails the United States and its European alliances with nuclear arms and demand a new security architecture where so-called legitimate security concerns of Russia are, let's say, taken into consideration or secured. I don't expect Mr. Trump to rush and to threaten Russia with a nuclear attack. And this means that the nuclear deterrence is not working as it was designed in 1960s, which is it's pity. It means that there will be more conflicts and there will be more temptations from Trump, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong Un, and some others to grab the territory of a neighboring state or to wage a war. So this is a key thing, and I understand why ordinary Americans preoccupied with their domestic issues, like economy, like cultural wars, like what's going on now in terms of migration, tariffs, and many other issues that directly affect Americans, and they don't want to think about the war. And possibly it was one of the reasons why there was a division even among the supporters of Mr. Trump when he decided to launch a military campaign, limited in terms of the targets and political goals, military campaign against Iran. Even though just like it was necessary step to deny Iran ability to have nuclear bomb and to commit a Holocaust against the Jewish state and to strengthen other partners and alliance of the United States in the region, not to mention the American assets in the Middle East and elsewhere. So this thing is really not comfortable to think about, but I believe it would be the right thing for the governments of the United States and some other European governments to let's say, acquaint their general public with the idea that war is possible. And the only way to deter this war is to invest in their defense capabilities and to signal to those potential aggressors that there would be consequences for any incursion in any aggression from their part. And I believe that majority of Europeans are not ready to fight for their countries, for their democracies. I've seen opinion polls even the United Kingdom, less than 50% of the citizens are ready to take arms and to fight for their country. It's a different case in the Baltic states, in Finland, and in Poland. Those nations are more, let's say, ready to defend their freedom, and they certainly they remember the occupation by the Russian Empire and then the Soviet Union of their territories and those atrocities committed by those regimes. So it's an issue of shaping the perception, and I believe it's the right thing to do. The 21st century is dangerous because we are heading toward a new international system where rule of law will play a lesser role, and we've seen it in Ukraine, in some other places, and where those nations need to show their readiness to sacrifice their lives for their freedoms. And this is the only way how to deter the malign actors.
Well, Finland in particular, Russia has been accumulating troops at the Finnish border, right? So their threat is quite it's not innocuous anymore. It's there. Because if we think about how the invasion of Ukraine started, and no one was believing that Russia is actually going to do something, but Russia was just accumulating troops at the Ukrainian border. So for Finland and for countries that have also suffered from Russia and the Russian invasion and the Russian rule in the past, which I believe not a lot of people know, but there is a territory of Finland that is now a territory of Russia because Russia annexed it. It was just way before we had international treaties or or sort of like an international understanding of what annexation means. um, there are many people in Russia, Karelians, for instance, who actually have a Finnish background, and they're living, they're now Russian, and that territory now belongs to Russia. So that threat is very, very real. Do you think the European Union is doing enough to prepare for the Russian threat, or if they're not, what should they be doing?
I believe that the general thinking in European capitals and in Brussels that they need to help Ukraine to defend itself because actually we are with our lives, with our infrastructure, we are buying time for our European partners to let's say scale up their defense capabilities and defense industry. And certainly, we highly appreciate the support from our Western partners. From the other hand, we can criticize them that it's not enough to beat Russians in Ukraine, so that the Russians would not be tempted to proceed further in the West. And certainly, Ukraine wants to be a member of NATO for the simple reason we want to deter Russia from the future aggression. And at the moment, we don't have. We do not, let's say, see an appetite in Europe. Fortunately, during this Hague summit, there will be right language with regard to Ukraine's future membership. The recent press conference by the Secretary General, and he said that no, it's not a issue of if, but the issue of when Ukraine will become a member of NATO. But talking about European Union, there been some positive steps, they adopted a document that is aimed to boost the defense capabilities of the European Union, so-called European Defense Industry Strategy. And actually, it's interesting document because Europeans see Ukraine as a part of their defense industrial base, and there are plenty venues of cooperation and integration of Ukrainian defense industry into the European one. It's obviously that Ukraine was capable of adjusting their Soviet legacy and new Ukrainian defense industry enterprises into the demands of the modern day conflict. And we have many know-hows, and we can invest our knowledge and technology to our partners. And we expect our partners to invest in Ukraine as well. I'm talking about not just money, and there are pretty good examples like Denmark is investing directly into Ukrainian defense industry, or Germany that is interested in investing in Ukraine's long-range striking capabilities, mostly drones, but possibly missiles as well. So we'd love to see more investment into Ukraine. And finally, we would love to see more investment into their own defenses and the, let's say, clarity for the defense industry and defense enterprises in Europe and elsewhere for these long-term defense contracts. We understand that Europe wants first and foremost to invest into air defense capabilities. Secretary General said that it's going to be 5 times that they have. They want to invest into the stockpiles of weapons, ammunition, and other things by a third, which is a pretty good thing. And certainly they will invest in modern capabilities related to drones, I mean, unmanned vehicles and AI-guided stuff, which will give an advantage over the potential enemy, particularly Russia, but not Russia. I mean, including Russia. And which is good that the Europeans are going to invest more into the defense in the if I'm not mistaken, now they are spending something like 350 billion euros, or something like that. And they're going to invest more and more, which is really important thing. And they need to prepare for the modern warfare. And actually, it's something that happened with Ukraine. We adopted some Western doctrines how to fight maneuverable warfare because we got some capabilities, Western capabilities like missiles, like modern jets, or pretty modern jets, and other things. And certainly we have our homegrown capabilities like drones, or various kinds of drones. So they need to understand that the possible war with Russia or any other adversary would be different to the one that Ukraine is fighting now. Firstly, because they possess some capabilities that are not in our, let's say, reach. If you're talking about air power, the even European NATO alliance would dominate the skies over Russia. If you're talking about the missile capabilities, they have advantage in precision and in sophistication, but unfortunately not in quantity. So they need to just scale it up. If you're talking about armor vehicles and MBTs, the Western, if you're talking about Leopard tanks and others, they are much better than the Russians. But they need to think about this war in future where the battlefield is transparent, filled with huge amount of drones that is like chasing you to kill. And it's a different story. So they need to change doctrines as well. And in Ukraine is pretty helpful here. And they need to be more, let's say, decisive in reaction to Russia. What I'm talking about? I'm not talking about the hard power. I'm talking about sanctions. Sanctions are really damaging Russian ability to wage this war and to develop their economy. But from the other hand, they fail to achieve the major goal that Ukraine would love to see is the, let's say, collapse of the Russian economy in inability of Russia to prosecute the war. So the sanctions in their incremental nature are allowing Russia to circumvent these sanctions and to find resources from their friends like China, India, even Turkey, a member of NATO. And that's why we're in the stage of war called attrition, as it's war of attrition, just because our partners didn't provide us with enough capabilities and didn't unleash damaging and destroy and destructive sanctions on Russia.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that could have been done much better, right? Especially giving Ukraine what Ukraine has been asking for in time in which Ukraine was asking for it, because I think it was treated in a sense as like, oh, they just want it, like a kid in a candy store where they're like, oh, you have this and you have that and you have that. I want it, like I want a Barbie and I want, the house and the car and all this stuff. But the thing is, we weren't asking for it because it's available, not because these are cool, modern, destructive weapons, but because these were genuinely things that we needed. And now we're set back quite a few years before Ukraine can actually deliver a big blow. Um, even with all the covert operations that we have been doing. Now, there has been a lot of concern about the Sumy border and the Russian offensive on the Sumy border, and kind of the fact that Ukraine has had a hard time stopping it. What do you think about that? And do you think it's an actual possibility? Well, actually, there is also a concern that Russia is now training troops in Belarus, and there is this conspiracy theory that exists, and I will voice it, and then I would like to hear your opinion on it. Right, is that Russia is kind of preparing another invasion of Kiev from Belarus, and would it be possible? Why or why not? And what the situation is like in Sumy.
There is a slim chance. If the Russians are crazy, so they can try to seize Kiev. They failed to do that in 2022 for many reasons. Even though it was a pretty good planned operation, I believe it was like the siege of the palace of Idi Amin in Afghanistan. So there was an idea of special forces infiltrated into Ukraine before the invasion, taking control of the command and control centers, decapitating Ukrainian state by capturing or killing our president, and so on, so on. So they failed to do this, and fortunately, our security service and our defense forces were able to just like to destroy these capabilities. And then the Russians failed to penetrate into Kiev with their armored vehicles and other things. There were several cases when some Russian forces were able to get into Kiev, but it was just rare cases, and they've been eliminated. Kiev is a huge city, and it's pretty easy to defend. And we used actually natural resources like we just like we let water to flood the roads from the northern direction. So the Russians choose to go just via the roads, and they were easy targets to destroy. Not to mention the inability of Russia to master logistic, and we've seen this huge several tens of kilometers long, and we just like destroyed many of their vehicles. So there is no chance of Russia to taking control of Kiev or encircling it, and so on. I believe that Sumy operation, contrary to the Russian claims that they want to have a sort of a buffer between Ukraine and Russia, and to protect their neighboring territories, it's just like let's say, smoke screen for the other goals. The Russians want to portray themselves as the winning party, that Ukrainians are not able to, let's say, slow down them or stop them in the east, and now from the northern direction. And certainly they hope to have, let's say, division between Europeans themselves and Europeans and Americans, so that our partners would push Ukraine for so-called compromise, which we in Ukraine consider as a capitulation, which is not acceptable for many reasons. And the most important reason is that we haven't been defeated. So we need to limit our sovereignty and to agree on the unacceptable terms of Russia. So they use this to divert our forces from different regions. We are pretty successful in expelling Russians from Sumy region. It's not a speedy process, but it's steady process. I would say. Unfortunately, the Russians are able to bombard the city of Sumy, and they're doing what they've been doing since 2022. It's I would call it urbicide. They're destroying Ukrainian cities. They want not to control it and to use its economic assets. They want to undermine Ukraine's ability to sustain, and they want to generate internally displaced people or refugees, and to create tensions between Ukrainian citizens and Ukrainian leadership. Fortunately, we see no signs of that. And we get used to overnight raids of drones and missiles. I don't want to repeat words that we repeat after each and every air siren. And I know for sure that more than half of Ukrainians, after the successful, let's say, work of our genius guys in air defense, Ukrainians are donating for our defense forces. So Russians are failing to break our will to resist. And there are many important factors to that. And I would say one of the historical and philosophical nature. When Ukraine lost its independence to the Bolsheviks, it was in last century in 1918, 1921, and the Bolsheviks took control of Kiev. There were mass killings of Ukrainian intellectuals and pro-Ukrainian people and government officials and many, many others. And then in 1932, 1933, they unleashed genocide, Holodomor genocide. 4 million Ukrainians were starved to death because Stalin didn't want Ukrainian to rise against the collectivization, and they wanted to get control over the Ukrainian natural resources like grain, or iron ore, and coal. So we don't want to repeat this bitter lesson of Ukraine. I'm not talking about the soft threats like Russification, like deportations of Ukrainians, and not just Ukrainians and other ethnic minorities from the territory they lived for centuries. So Ukrainians remember that, and they are ready to sacrifice almost everything to retain and to preserve our sovereignty and territorial integrity and our willingness to be part of the European civilization rather than the so-called Russian world. So I don't think that they will be successful there. And we've seen that they have a lack of resources. So they are not advancing on the south. They tried to force the river and to get into Kherson region, and they failed to do that. And they are advancing in the east slowly and with no, let's say, huge progress that someone can call near victory. But why I'm talking about this in detail? For some observers, not experts, not in military, it may seem like Russia is winning, which is not the case. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not winning because of lack of some capabilities like air power, missiles, and other things. But the Russians want to portray their advancement as a almost victory, so there is no reason for Europeans to waste their resources helping Ukraine. And it's better to agree on the acceptable, well, at least Russians believe that it's acceptable for Europeans terms. But let me remind you finally just one thing. In 2021, when there was a first threat of invasion of Ukraine, Russia blackmailed the United States and European partners, and they wanted the United States to get their belongings and to get out of European continent, and European part of NATO to expel their Central and Eastern European countries from NATO. So this war is about subjugation of Ukraine and destroying Ukrainian nation. And Putin is bluntly clear about his genocidal intent. He is talking about one nation, so we are all Russians, so Ukrainians and Belarusians, which is let's say nonsense. And he's talking about the where the foot of the Russian soldier stands. There is Russia. And Russian soldiers in one period of time, they were in Paris, they were in Berlin, and they were in many countries of Europe. So, given this logic of Mr. Putin, it means that he may proceed further and further. So that's why so-called compromise, even though for some European countries they may see like acceptable for Ukraine, they would be like encouragement of Putin to go further and further because some parts of Europe used to be parts of Russian Empire or the Soviet Union and so on and so on. So that's why all these, let's say, factors are playing in the minds of Ukrainians and fortunately in the minds of our European partners. And I don't think that the European partners let's say, will lose this, let's say, willingness to help Ukraine to protect itself and by helping Ukraine to deter Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good summary of sort of what so many people misunderstand and what they should start understanding. So I guess my final question would be, since I see you have a lot of books behind you, what would be, if you were to recommend one book that you think people in the West should read to sort of understand what time frame we are living in and how to navigate it, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I love ancient history, and you can see the Cambridge Ancient History series, and I believe you can learn everything you need for the modern world. Certainly not about AI or drones and other things from these books. And I believe this the founding father of the political realism, Thucydides, who wrote a Peloponnesian War, is something that people need to read. There is no God in what he was writing. It's just the calculated decision of strategists and politicians that was they were designing wars or campaigns and other things. So reading the classical books is the most important thing during the, let's say, our times of the short attention span and this social media, TikTok thinking and other things. We need to read long texts. We need to read classical texts because the technical things that has been added throughout millennia are not really relevant to the human nature. And it's better to read classical books that explain this human nature, how to behave and how to be ready to sacrifice, how to fight for your freedom and for your national interests.
Amazing. Thank you so very much. And of course, thank you for coming here today. I really do hope that this conversation is going to help people understand what we're facing and how imminent this threat is rather than just imaginary or far away. And I hope to have you here soon again. Not in a year,
And yes, for
because I
sure.
think it's been about a year. So thank you so much for giving
With
me your
pleasure.
time. And I really appreciate all of your thoughts and everything that you've told us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope this conversation was as interesting and productive to you as it was to me, because to me, certainly, it was very interesting. And if you enjoy conversations like this, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications, like this video, send it to a friend, and of course, leave me all of your thoughts, questions, and suggestions in the comments down below. See you next time.